During a fundraiser with billionaire donors, Donald Trump emphasized that there are some immigrants that he can get behind, that he can support coming here to the United States. Now, first, he went on a pretty lengthy rant about the current migrant crisis. So let's start with that, and then we'll get back to the specific migrants he's in favor of. He said, quote, "These are people coming in from prisons and jails. They're coming in from just unbelievable places and countries that are a disaster. They've been shipped in, brought in, deposited in our country, and they're with us tonight." Oh, they went to the billionaire donor fundraiser?
But if they are from foreign countries and they offer him money, Trump will take it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Now, of course, they weren't at the fundraiser, but let me continue with what he had to say. "In fact, I don't think they're on this island, but I know they're on that island right there. That's West Palm," Trump said, gesturing across the water, according to the attendee. "Congratulations over there, but they'll be here. Eventually, they'll be here." Now, Trump stated that gang members make the Hells Angels look extremely nice people. And he tends to fearmonger about immigrants and migrants. What doesn't help is that unfortunately there have been a few high-profile stories in the media recently involving some migrant gangs. There have been some stories out of New York, for instance. There was a group of squatters that were caught in a home in New York City. And they had guns, all sorts of weapons, criminal history, all of that stuff, unfortunately, is helping to drive some of the narrative that Trump wants to put out there about immigrants in general. But as we know, for the most part, immigrants are not proven to be more violent or dangerous than American citizens are. And we should have a better immigration system. We do need to reform it, and we do need to have better control of our border. But with that said, Trump is very clearly fear-mongering here.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you. Guys, I talked to someone who works with the border without getting into too many details and deals with undocumented immigrants all the time over the weekend. And it was actually really, really informative. I know all the stats and all the facts already, but to get his perspective on who is coming over the border was really interesting, right? Because even the right wing got even into my mind, and I was like, so look, I know that the great majority of the people coming over are families that are in desperate situation, sometimes fleeing violence, mainly for economic reasons. But I assume that but are there bad guys crossing the border? Of course there are.
Especially
right?
if you don't have control of the border.
Yeah, and so I assumed that maybe the bad guys were 10%, and I asked him, and he's like, not even close.
10% seems high.
Yeah, and he's like, that's a comically, he didn't put it this way because he's a very nice guy, but comically high number. No, it's a tiny, tiny percentage. There's a lot of ways for gang members and criminals to come into the country. The overwhelming majority of the people that are coming in are just regular families. You could be upset about that, but that's a different issue.
Yes.
So when Trump talks about how they're emptying the jails and the prisons and sending them over here, so it's not true on that alone, but think about it, guys. There's an extra layer that a country like Mexico, or he said China in the past, and rando countries are like, oh, we have a plan. Let's take everybody in this jail, get them a plane ticket to Mexico, or if they're already in Mexico, let's just get them a bus and then release them at the border.
No, we should deposit them in the United States, as Trump worded it, which is a funny way of wording it, okay?
That's never happened, that's not a thing. There has never been a report of a country taking prisoners out of their prison and purposely depositing them in America. That's the kind of thing a lunatic conspiracy theorist would think. It doesn't mean bad guys aren't getting in. We have to prevent the bad guys from coming in. But this kind of crazy talk about how everybody coming across the border was sent from Mexican and Venezuelan and Chinese and Pakistani prisons is lunatic stuff.
But I will say, Democrats also need to get their act together because they're providing fodder for Donald Trump in fear-mongering about migrants. And this was the point I tried to make, but leftists lost their minds about it. They can continue losing their minds about it. But this specific incident that I'm about to describe is what helps Donald Trump push a narrative that fearmongers and honestly defames the vast majority of migrants who came here. So again, most recently, 6 of 8 migrant squatters arrested in New York City on drug and gun charges have been released by 2 judges without posting bail against the discretion of local district attorneys. Okay, and this happened right across a school. And so, look, these are the high profile stories that conservatives latch on to push that narrative. And so maybe reconsider some of the local laws that allow for some of this stuff to happen. And absolutely, the Democratic Party, the Biden administration needs to take more action at the border. Yes, it's really up to Congress, but the lack of activity in Congress in regard to immigration reform didn't stop Donald Trump from taking action at the border. So why is Biden using that excuse? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so we're gonna get to whether Trump's comments were racist in a second. But in terms of this issue, look, the main problem is the local laws. And we've talked about that before. We're not we moved some things from felonies to misdemeanors, so we're not prosecuting them or putting bail on them for pretty significant crimes like domestic assault and robberies, etc. So, but it really doesn't have to do with immigrants as a class, because as we've told you many times, and you can look this up. So, natural-born citizens, unfortunately, have
higher crime rates.
Higher crime rates. Yep. They do. It's just a fact. Undocumented immigrants have half the crime rate. Half the crime rate of natural-born citizens, and documented immigrants like myself that came over legally have a quarter of the crime rate of natural-born Americans. So we've got to get ourselves under control, but the idea that the immigrants are more violent or more criminal on average is just flat out not true, not close to true.
Exactly. All right. Now let's get back to some of the other comments Donald Trump made about immigration, because he did specify that there are some immigrants that he can get behind, that he's supportive of. He said, quote, and when I said, why can't we allow people to come from nice countries? I'm trying to be nice. Nice countries, like Denmark, Switzerland. Do we have any people coming from Denmark? How about Switzerland? How about Norway? Trump, the reason why that's not the case is because maybe, just maybe, the policies in their countries are favorable to the policies implemented in our country. And maybe they don't need to leave because they like the way things are going in their country.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the 2 ironies. First of all, he just named some of the most socialist countries in the world.
Yeah.
So, socialism is terrible. But how about the beautiful, nice countries like Norway and Sweden who are socialist? So
I mean, they're mixed economies.
Yeah.
We are a mixed economy. It's just that there are more privatized sectors of our economy compared to what they have in Denmark, for instance, Norway, for instance, right?
Yeah, and so what does it mean to be socialist in that context? Because the word socialism means nothing at all anymore because of how widely people use it for completely different contexts. So in that context, it means a much stronger social safety net,
right,
like universal health care for everyone, paid family leave for like close to a year in most of those countries, etc. And we don't have that. We're more backwards, uncivilized, barbaric. So if somebody from Northern Europe came here, they're like, wait, I can't get a single day off if I have a baby? And minimum wage is abysmally low. Well, they don't even need minimum wage in their countries because they have such a strong safety net. We don't have universal health care, so if I don't have insurance, I could just be left to die? Like, that's unthinkable for Northern Europe,
yeah,
right? So that's why they're not coming from those nice countries. It has nothing to do with race, but of course the knucklehead couldn't name one country that wasn't white.
And by the way, let me give you this insane data on Norway that should infuriate everyone, because I think a lot of Americans have been tricked into thinking that, look, we have lower taxes here in the United States, and I would prefer that over the super high taxes in countries like, let's say, Norway, right? They might have a more robust social safety net, but their taxes are out of control. We don't want to pay those taxes, right? Well, let's go to graphic 7 here. Norwegian workers pay a roughly 25% income tax rate, a flat rate of 22%, plus a personal income tax of 2 to 16%, depending on their income. That's on par with what the average American family pays in income tax. But in Norway, those taxes pay for generous social welfare programs for almost all Norwegian residents, including migrant workers, by the way, or those on temporary work permits, and immigrants with legal resident status. Norwegian social welfare encompasses comprehensive unemployment benefits, retirement pay, and healthcare coverage that covers just about everything from mental health care to ambulance and emergency services to clinical care for transgender residents. So in other words, people from Norway are not interested in immigrating to the United States. I mean, there might be some, but overall, you're not seeing this wave of Norwegian migrants coming to the US because things are they're doing pretty well over there. And so one of the possible fixes for the migrant crisis could be to help some of the countries that are struggling economically, which is leading to migrants flowing into our country for economic opportunity. But that is a long-term goal, long-term plan. That would take a lot of work. It would take resources, of course, and it should be part of a comprehensive immigration reform policy.
And of course, the biggest difference there, guys, isn't the taxes, it's what we spend the money on.
Exactly.
They spend it on their own citizens because, by the way, here's another giant part of it, they don't have money in politics. So you can't just buy off all the politicians. That's why they actually have a democracy. We don't even have a democracy. The donors control everything in America. That's why we don't spend our money on the citizens. We spend our money on wars, defense contractors, drug companies, bankers, subsidies for oil companies, all of our money.
Foreign aid
to do genocide in Israel, et cetera, et cetera. All of our money never comes back to us. So that's why people hate taxes in America.
Yep.
And in Northern Europe, they don't mind the taxes anywhere near as much as we do because it comes back to them in services. That's what's supposed to happen in a democracy. Back to the race thing for 1 second. Just name Singapore. Singapore is, especially if you're a conservative, is kind of an ideal country. And it's clean and nice and all the things that you want. Nope, cannot name one single non-white country. He just doesn't have it in him. And is he pro-immigrant from those countries? Of course, his wife is from one of those countries in a sense, more Eastern Europe, but from Slovenia. So he's like, if you're white, and especially if you're hot, of course you're welcome in America. But if you're from a non-white country, criminals and rapists. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.